Welcome, Eva and Patricia. So
Thank
nice
you.
to see both of you here.
Thank you, thank you. It's our pleasure.
How are you two doing?
Well, I'm so glad the weather is not as humid and hot as yesterday, so at least I can walk, from buildings to buildings, and I think it's something that finally I realize is cold is actually not too bad.
Yes, for everyone who's been with us, this Toronto Tech Week was scorching in many different ways, apparently.
Totally.
How are you doing, Patricia, today?
Anytime I get to hang out with a vector team is a great day.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we'll dive in then. I wanted to talk about some of our AI snapshot stuff that we've already discussed earlier today, but more from the lens that you guys are more familiar with. And I also wanted to mention that Patricia's company, Private AI, is our bronze sponsor, and so is Wattpad. And it's amazing to have a community at Vector full of people who actually propel artificial intelligence. So in the Toronto startup ecosystem, it has grown quite rapidly in the recent years. We see that also in the recent Ontario AI snapshot that we have published. Ontario AI sector continues to attract more VC funding at $2.6 billion last year than several other sectors combined. For example, energy, manufacturing, financial services, and agriculture altogether do not even add up to $1 billion. What do you see as its most unique advantages or gaps, especially for AI founders based in Ontario?
I'm going to let Patricia speak because, you're building a very important company, not only in our country, I think, actually for the whole world. So what are you seeing, in terms of talent? Like, why do you want to build it in Canada, specifically in Toronto?
Lots of reasons. That's very kind. Thank you. So in Toronto, of course, there's the machine learning talent. The machine learning talent, which has been building since before this current AI wave. So that is, it was the case that a few years ago, it was very hard to find AI talent that had actually deployed AI at scale. Here, there are a ton of people who have done that. Of course, there's Shred, which is very helpful to afford that talent. And there's the very great ecosystem to bounce ideas off of. You have folks from banking, you have folks from energy, you have folks from all over the spectrum of industries to be able to discuss with.
Yeah, I totally echo that because I think, for me as a VC, half of my portfolios are based in Canada and then half of it are mostly from US and also from rest of the world. I think what makes Toronto specifically so uniquely positioned to be able to kind of like be the hub at the moment for AI companies to thrive, I think there are multiple reasons. So first of all, obviously the AI talent coming out from U of T, coming out from Waterloo, coming out from the universities, certainly that talent pool is very, very strong. And I think, with the Jeffrey Hinton effect, it will continue to become like, the hub to attract these talent. And at the same time, we look at our startup scale-up ecosystem from a technology perspective. So certainly historically, Toronto and Waterloo has always been the hub. So you got talent, fresh, you got veterans now. And I think what's more interesting, if you actually just look from here, Queen's Park subway station, all the way to St. Andrews, span over to King, coming back up on Bloor, that's the center for banking, health, finance, and many others. So where do you find, a city in a country that actually you can have, access to the banking partners, CIBC, TD Bank, RBC, National Bank, Scotiabank, all these ones are really embedding themselves in the ecosystem, right? And then in terms of energy, so certainly Hydro One, Toronto Hydro, and all these ones, they're all here as well. So UHN, literally just on this corridor. So you can see that we have all these kind of supporting actors in the ecosystem ready to participate. So I think, if you're asking me what's the future look like, I think Toronto, or I should say Ontario, will continue to be kind of like the engine for our AI innovations. But I certainly don't want to dismiss, as the Vector team talked about, the sister institutions. the Amy in Edmonton and then the Mila in Montreal, they are certainly also playing a very important role for our AI strategy for the country.
Absolutely. I also love how you've listed most of our sponsors. Little sponsorship about vector advertising right here. And definitely, I think that Toronto and Ontario in general are just such great places to be in AI, starting from some of the origins of artificial intelligence and going all the way to how we actually now commercialize that research in everyday companies. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you, what originally drew you to the AI space, and how have your views evolved personally as both the technology and funding environment have shifted? Eva, how about you start with this one?
I think, right now, we certainly in our country have a chronic issue of relatively being very risk averse. So I think, from a entrepreneurship perspective, I think many of the people have read the reports. I think, in terms of the number of entrepreneurs, percentage-wise of a population, going, pursuing their own companies in the last 20 years actually has been declining. So I think, we can point fingers to many, many reasons of why it's declining, but I think one of the reasons probably is the risk averseness. It could be because, the cost of living is so high, but, that on its own, it's an issue. But at the same time, I'm sure that, Patricia, you have lots to talk about is the capital risk averseness. When we are talking about investors, in the VC world, in the private equity world, I think, I'm one of the few people who actually don't really care about revenue when, early stage startup comes pitched to me. Because we are looking at very early stage, so revenue is always a proxy. But at the same time, a lot of the capital providers, from a venture capital perspective, from venture debt perspective, the number one thing is like, how much revenue are you generating? Because they need to kind of like make sure that this is a relatively safe bet. So the risk averseness, from the founder is already happening. Capital-wise, it's even worse. Now, let's talk about adoption. Adoption, I think a lot of people also talked about in the earlier of the sessions, is like, we were the frontier in terms of the AI innovations. But if we look at the adoption in the ecosystem, at the same time, it's like slower, in many fronts, among the G7. So all in a sudden, allow me to say, everyone in the room, we should all look at the mirror. Why are we being so risk averse? I think this is a question that I think, if you ask me, it's the roadblock between us and the future.
Oh, I really agree with that. I think we need more Canadians saying yes enthusiastically to things. Whether it's buying Canadian AI products, talking about investors who are investing even if without revenue. But yeah, Patricia, how about you? How do you think your views have evolved when the technology and funding environment has shifted in the recent years?
I will say the funding environment is much better than 5-6 years ago. COVID actually, I think, helped with that, helped bring money into the country. I think CDL helped a lot as well. There are a few things that the government could be doing to try to step in to help with some of that risk averseness. Funding companies early on before revenue, because even the government is risk averse when it comes to grants. Do you have funding? Do you have revenue? And that is not when the companies need money. They could go get money elsewhere or get customer money. The government needs to step in early on to fill in that gap, or we need more investors like Eva who are willing to go out there and invest no matter the stage. The government should also ideally be helping fund organizations like CDL. They've done a great job at funding Vector, Amy, and so on, but we also need more CDLs who are no bullshit, pardon the language, who bring the network here, the network of investors, the network of experts, the network of people who have scaled companies, because that is a very specific skill in product, in go-to-market, that you need the population trained in that. It just doesn't appear overnight.
Thank you so much. Patricia, actually, I'm going to ask you again a question. From your perspective as a founder yourself, and I know that you're friends with many other founders too, are founders in Toronto, in your opinion, and you as well, are you building with a local mindset, or are you thinking globally right away from day one? Do you think that there should be more or another of what's being done so far?
I think it depends on the kind of business that you're building, but if you're doing B2B, you can't think locally. You have to think globally right away, or you're not going to survive.
No, I think, you know what, even to build on that, I think nowadays, especially in this, current geopolitical climate, I hope that is a serious wake-up call for all the founders in the room, right? Because I think, I've come across thousands of deals. So in the last 10 years of investment, I've already, we recently make our 6th years. It doesn't mean that we have only looked at 60 companies. We've actually looked at thousands in the tens, in the last 10 years. And many founders, the very first thing they said to us is like, of course, we're building. Our number one customer is the US. Great, of course, 10 times our population, it makes a ton of sense. And at the end of the day, that's the economic engine, globally. But I think at the same time, I think we honestly saying, we are really missing the boat of globalization and not necessarily being able to capture the larger market. So if you actually look at Wattpad, the company that I helped my husband build, 100 million monthly users, sharing fictional stories, 1 million news stories every day, using AI more than 10 years ago, trying to kind of like predict the success of those stories and turn them into TV shows, movies, and books. US is actually number 2 or number 3 of the whole user base. We got content, 50 languages, in Spanish, in German, in French, and in Tagalog, you name it. And we have productions worldwide. Again, Netflix shows, Amazon Prime, in all different languages. And I actually think that Toronto specifically, if you ask me, absolutely have the DNA to build global companies. Half of our populations are immigrants. When you actually join a startup, you should not only, look at the company that what product are they building. You should actually bring in your own perspective. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. The very first question I would be like, will Hong Kong people ever write stories on Wattpad? Let's see. Same thing. If you're building a fintech company, I think obviously regulatory issues have different things across jurisdiction. But I think one of the things is to ask ourselves is like, will my family back, home or generations before be able to adopt that? And I think that's a global mindset that we can actually all adopt.
Thank you so much. And absolutely agreed with all of this, obviously, with all of the things that we're talking about. It's so important to keep these things in mind. I do have 3 lightning round questions to round all of this up. So these are going to be quick and fun. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind, whoever wants to go first for each one of you. But how about this? We'll start with one startup you wish you had built if you had all the resources in the world.
If I had all the resources in the world, I'd love to do something in recycling. It would be so magical to just be able to, or in chemistry, to be able to change the chemicals from one to another. But that requires so much fundamental research. But imagine just pitching something into a bucket and it turns into something else.
Solving big problems, I see.
For me, I would say that, this is a personal thing. I don't, when you ask me if there's any money in it, I don't think so, but let me just share with you. If there's an app that actually makes use of all the AI and reinforcement learning, large language model, whatever you name it, to understand my family dynamics, to make me the best mom ever, and then hope that I will be able to raise best kids ever, I think that would solve the world's problem, don't you think?
I think your daughters are doing well, very well.
You know what? We're talking about a scalable product that everybody have it. Then all of a sudden, every person can be a best parents. Their kids will be the best kids. Wouldn't that the world would be the best place ever?
I think we just need to clone you, apparently. Okay, and the last, what's the one thing you would change about Toronto tech scene, if you could?
Well, I think I spoke a lot. I think it's that whole risk aversion. I just hope that there's a pill, everybody can just take it, and like, I'm now a risk taker, and let's just go big or go home.
I'd say I'd multiply the high quality early startup investors. So two small fish, foreign ventures we went through when we were very, very early on, and they are incredible. I wish I could replicate Jonah Medatic, who's the managing director there, 1,000,000 times. That would make such a difference for the ecosystem.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patricia and Eva.
Thank you.